I'm Kim Kral. I'm reporting to you not live from my closet. I was unclear if I was gonna say hello or hi, and then I went, oh, it's Kral space. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but then it made me laugh. Hi guys. I'm very late today. I've had a rough breathing day. I started to record the podcast. I also am going to touch on some pretty rough subjects today. I have some things I'd like to get off my chest. But I have some things I'd like to talk about. And it was sparked by some recent news. And I know I've been wanting to talk. I wanted to do it last week and this week, and now I'm just going to do it. But I was avoiding doing this morning, like I owed it money and I couldn't pinpoint why. And normally how I work is if I'm avoiding, and I think most people, I don't think I'm very unique in this, but like how I work is if I feel like if I'm avoiding something, it's because there's something that needs to be looked at. And like, I was like, you don't have to talk about this today if you don't want to, but like, I was nervous about talking about this stuff I've talked in the last couple of weeks. And, truthfully, the whole podcast, like things that have come up that I talk about, I'm like scared of being that vulnerable and talking about my experiences. And I feel like so far it's gone all right. So I will, it's okay. But yeah, so I was avoiding it. And then I had sort of not a confrontation, but like a disagreement with a friend. Not a disagreement. That's it. Just some boundaries that needed to be set, which is like one of my dearest friends, a very like spiritually healthy, emotionally intelligent person. But we both had kind of hurt each other's feelings. And I was going, my thoughts on stuff like that is I usually just like, I usually burn it down and walk away. That's usually I'm very black. I grew up, the way I grew up, my instinct is to do black and white thinking. And so either I like, bury it and just like let her do whatever she wants, or I burn it down and walk away. Right. And I don't do that anymore. And this is a person who, understands that that's so when I feel this way, I like table it for 24 hours, but she had other plans and I'm glad she did, because I was already really nervous about this show. Really bummed out that this is still a thing that we all have to talk about. And then also I was really sad about, having this like, I hate wearing like tiff, and it wasn't even that. It was just some misunderstanding or just some boundaries. I don't know what the right word for that, but you know what I mean? Like I was still feeling like really weighed down. But like, cheers to having friends that like you can talk to about your needs and your boundaries, and know that like it's not like I'm going to just start off with I'm one lucky broad. Because I feel like I need to do a trigger warning for this episode. I will do, this is a trigger warning. I am going to talk about me too, and some experiences I've had. So I hope it's not too triggering for people to listen to. I hope that just the warning though shows that I do promise that there's some really fun poop scoop stuff at the end. So we'll just like have a full blown palate cleanse of talking about, shitting your pants. I hope, I don't know, we're reading another person's poop scoop. Also, people don't follow instructions. I'm like, hey, email this email. And then they're like, well, they do. Like, they know the instruction. I had so many people DM me, be like, hey, I know that you said to email you, but I'm going to do it here. And I'm like, hey, I'm not going to read this also. What? But so I am going to attach trigger warning, I guess. I hope that doesn't deter people. I'm also really afraid. There's a lot of levels to it. I'm really afraid of talking about my own stories, just because it's scary, it's vulnerable. There's an element of fear there that people don't believe you, or they dismiss it, diminish it. But also like I don't know, the fear of that, and then I just don't want anybody to not want to listen to me because I broach on some rough subjects. But I feel like, once again, I've been doing that this whole time. And if you're still here, I think you're still going to be here. But I do want to start. So I'm going to start off with I'm one lucky broad. I'm one lucky broad that I now have friends in my life. And I am now a person that is also this way, that you can set boundaries and there's no backlash of like, what? Whoa, like I'm going to take this super personally. Like I was talking to some friends the other day, and we were talking about, if you set a boundary with a healthy person, if you set a boundary or express a need with like a healthy person, a spiritually sound, emotional, intelligent person, it's not scary, because there shouldn't be anything, it should be received and listened to, and it should be received with nothing but, oh my God, it wasn't in my intention to hurt you. I'm really sorry it did. I will not do that again. I hear you. I respect you. No, I love you. You know what I mean? Like, I worked with someone for a very long time that I was not able to express these needs or have any sort of conflict, because if I did, he would either leave or it was just a very toxic, unhealthy partnership. But he was also a very emotionally unintelligent person, that anything I expressed was, came with backlash of like, whoa, well, you do this, or like, I'm not that bad of a like. But if you have those people in your life that, that I'm stuttering, but that, listen to you and be that too for them, like I was talking to a guy I used to work with today, and we were talking about when we worked together and how we had a lot of conflicts, but we didn't express. We're very different people now. Now it's been like 10 years, but like we'd never expressed our issues because we both were like either just like, oh, hopefully it just resolves itself, I don't want to deal with this, or like afraid the other person would leave or there would be backlash. But we're now people that have done enough work on ourselves that if he were to ever come to me and be like, hey, this upset me, I'm not a person who'd be like, fuck off, I don't care. But there was a time in my life where I would have been. And so, God, learning is hard. Trying to be a better person. I wish, no, I don't. I don't wish that. I was going to say, I wish I wasn't a person who gave a fuck, but I don't wish that. It's just, it's not for the weak, especially I was taught and given some very skewed tools on how to interact with people in the world. And I am slowly but surely unwiring all of that. And it's going to take time and it's going to be painful. But I'm one lucky broad that I have people in my life that, one, are on that journey with me and, understand that I'm human and allow me to make mistakes and allow me to set boundaries and express needs and open with, love and understanding. And there's communication, not like, yeah, I used to work with someone who it would, I would be belittled or yelled at or ignored, or, once we'd go on air, he would, say shitty. It was just a really rough situation. And now I just don't have that kind of people in my life. And it's just, I'm so fucking lucky, man. So a man in this is what sparked me wanting to talk about Me Too. And I think the reason why I want to talk about it, I think it's important. I think it's really important. And I think it's important that people get to tell their stories. I know that there's still people out there that are like, it's not that bad, or like, oh, I've never raped anybody, or like that. My uncle actually said that to me once. I've never raped anyone. That was his response to the Me Too movement. I was like, congratulations. That's literally the bare minimum. And like me saying, I've never murdered anyone. You're not supposed to. So you shouldn't be asking for like some sort of pat on the back for doing something you're not supposed to do. And he was like, that's different. And I'm like, yeah, you can justify murdering someone. You can't justify raping someone. And I actually have a show on Stereo, as you guys know. And my co-host and I talked about that. And Kelsey Lane, who's very funny and talented. And she was like, I don't think you can justify murdering someone. And then we had callers in because I was like, well, I know you can, but I don't have the words to explain that. Right. And I'm not meaning like justify murder just to anybody. I mean like self-defense, someone murdering your kid and then you coming back, like you killing that person, like in a court of law, most of those people get off. So I'm saying like you can never so that's what I said to my uncle. I was like, you can justify murder. Like there are cases. I don't want to upset or lose anybody. I might lose everybody when I talk. This is such a hard subject. And I think that's why I want to tell my stories. I promise you. And that's what I was trying to say to my uncle too. I was like, you have a daughter, dude. Like, understand, like maybe she hasn't told you all of this. I can't imagine why. But like the things she has to deal with on a day-to-day basis just for being a woman, Like I know that's blanket. I'm not trying to negate any men who have had assault or harassment. I know that it goes on both sides. I know that actually on the male side, unfortunately, it's, I don't know the statistics, but obviously, um, it's way underreported and there's a lot more shame around it. And it just makes me look at it and just be like, God, we have so much fucking work to do. Like just like going through these experiences and just the different responses from people. And I hope that this is received well. I hope, because I'm going to be honest, I'm really scared to record this. Um, a, a man in the comedy community died 2 weeks ago. I won't say, I will say his name. I've talked about him on a couple of episodes. His name is Big Mike. I just won't say the victims of his that I know or their stories. I just don't. That's one thing that I don't appreciate people telling other people's stories. Like I think it's like, oh, I've heard he's a bad guy, but you know what I mean? Like I just think it's not yours to tell. But that's a trigger and a boundary of my own. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel. But so I won't be telling their sides or the other stories I've heard. I'll just tell my own. Yeah, he passed away 2 weeks ago, and he was like the king of bringer shows, right? So he was the guy. And if you're not a comedian, a bringer show is something you have to kind of do when you first start doing comedy. It's like it's like pay to play. Like you can perform on this amazing stage at the world famous comedy store, but you have to bring 8 people. You have to have 8 paying people in order to, and that's something that I like. If comics tell you they didn't do bringer shows, they're either lying or they're not very far in their comedy career. Cause like there's some comics who are like, I refuse to do bringer shows. And it's like, get off your high horse, dude. You're not that and also as you progress into comedy, they're all kind of bringer shows. Like every show I do, I like to promote and like, I want to sell tickets. I want like, until you're like Bill Burr and like that's still bringer, but like he doesn't need to do anything. They still just come, you know what I mean? But he was like the king of the bringer shows. And I got my start with him. And it's hard. I talked about him at some point I know in episodes, I quit comedy because of what he did to me for a long time. And I have a lot of shame around it. I have a lot of shame that I did his shows. That I kept doing his shows after all of this. I was in my mid-20s, had done nowhere near the work I have done now. I'm a completely different person. I spent most of my 20s, chasing alcohol and boys just to like not feel any of the stuff that happened to me as a girl, as a little girl with, my home life. So I have a lot of shame around. I'm trying to let myself off the hook, and I'm working through that because it's not my shame; it's Big Mike's. But he passed away 2 weeks ago, and a lot. First of all, I got some messages that were like, "How do you like? What do you think about that?" And it's just like I won't. I am talking about how I feel about it now in like a very public forum as I refuse to do it via text to some people who are messaging me. But there's a difference. Like I wasn't getting messages. I was getting messages that were like, "Did you hear about Big Mike?" And I was like, "Yes." And they were like, "What do you think about it?" Like one of my another boundary pet peeve, I don't like gossip, and especially gossip when it comes to such a sensitive subject as Me Too stuff. And what do you think is such like a gossipy and like if it wasn't like how are you feeling? Because truthfully, like I mean, I'll talk about what Mike did, and I'll try to put into words. It's interesting what I'm learning too in the last couple of weeks while I've been trying to process my emotions around this death. Um, there's not a word for what he did. Like he didn't rape me. He didn't assault me. It's arguable about the whole assault thing. He did violate me pretty bad, but he didn't rape me. And but he also didn't harass me. He for sure harassed me, but he did way more. You know what? Like it's just so funny. It's like we have. This is gonna be rough. They have not the breathing. I had to stop earlier. I tried to record for like an hour, or I tried to record for like a half hour, and this episode's important to me, and it was just getting interrupted by my breathing because I couldn't do it. but like they have the word, sexual harassment, and then they have rape. And then there's like one word in the middle that just is like, that's such a like misconduct. And it's just such a polite way to put really heinous behavior to me, that so like the perpetrator doesn't have to like feel uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, we'll see misconduct so Matt Lauer doesn't feel uncomfortable that he like ruined lives. That's just an example I'm thinking of. Unfortunately there's a lot of examples, but so it's hard because but Big Mike gave me my start. I made a lot of friends through Big Mike, and I got to be on a lot of fun stages. But Big Mike treated me like I was an object. And it was hard on Facebook. I had to, as I've said, I've had to kind of stay away from stress right now because my breathing is just all over the place. And I find when I'm stressed out, my breathing gets much, much worse. And I think that's what was going on this morning. Truthfully, I was really nervous about this. But I kind of talked it through with a friend beforehand, the boundary friend beforehand. And I actually feel a lot better. Thank God for friends, good. Thank God for friends like that. But yeah, Facebook was just full of God. It was just a really hard thing. But I'm please bear with me and thank you for your patience with my stumbling through this. I'm doing my best. This is a hard subject, but I feel like I want to get my stories out there, and I want not only so I feel heard, but also I want people who maybe haven't been able to talk about it or feel the shame that I've felt. Maybe they'll feel for us. Maybe you'll feel for just a second you're not alone, But yeah, I remember one time I was at the Improv, and I had just met this girl, and a lovely girl, very funny comedian. I won't say I'm not the names except for the predators will be X'd out, but very funny. We just met that night, and if you don't know the Hollywood Improv, it's there's a bar area it has like two big windows that face Melrose Avenue Boulevard. I don't know what Melrose is. Melrose Street. I feel like I should know that. It faces that, and so I was facing the street and she was facing the people, right? And there's another room called the Lab. And you can get to that room, which is just another smaller stage room. You can get to that with another bar. You can get to that room through the hallway inside, or you can walk around and go to it from the outside, right? And so we were like, oh, we should go into the Lab. And she freezes and like a tear wells up in her eye, like this fear and tears. And she goes, do you mind if we go around outside? And I was like, yeah, girl. And I turned around and there was standing there Big Mike. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, me too. I don't want to pass him either. And she was like, okay. And so we walked in the other way, and like he dies, and she writes like a 15-page tribute to him on Facebook and Instagram about what a wonderful guy he was and how much she loved him and how sad she is. And like on surface, a lot of people are like, well, that was for the likes, or what bullshit, or how angry. But like, I felt that way. I felt that, like, truthfully, and I'm honoring the way I felt. I felt betrayed. But as I try to do when I feel something like that towards somebody, I try to dig deeper, right? Because sometimes there's a trigger there, or there's something that I need to look at, or I am plain wrong, or my betrayal is correct. But I like to especially have a lot of respect for this woman. And so I looked inward, and then I called my cousin, who I'm very close to, and I was trying to work through my feelings about the whole thing. I don't know where to put it. Not her post, I mean Mike's death, and I tell her, and my cousin goes, well, you know what that is? That's shame. And I was like, oh yeah. Up until about 5 years ago, maybe now I'm older now. I keep forgetting how old I am. Everything to me is like 5 years ago. Up until like 10 years ago, I was a broken record with my father. I was like, my dad is the greatest person that ever lived. My dad was my best friend. My dad and I are best friends. My dad is wonderful. I love my dad so much. Like, I fawned over him because I was afraid of him, because I had shame about what happened. And I can't tell you why she posted this big thing. I can tell you, kind of bummed me out, but I also know that like we all deal with like I do know in that very moment, she was just as afraid of him as I was. And however that translated after his death, I am grappling, like, this is how I'm handling it. I'm talking on my podcast about it. Yeah, so he treated me like a piece of meat, like an object, right? Like that, and that was, I mean, he was notorious for um being that way towards women, but it was like it was very handsy, a lot of grabbing, a lot of groping, and I would freeze while he would just. I remember one night we were sitting in the comedy store, and we were in the main room, and we were in the booth. I was sitting in the booth, and I have a lot of shame too because I was a little drunk, and I was very drunk in those days, and so I was drunk, and he climbs into the booth, and he has a wife and kids, and he starts groping on me and touching me and making out with the side of my neck and my face. And I literally freeze. Like, I have tears in my eyes and I don't want it to happen, but I freeze. And that was probably the worst of it, which is not great, but violating. It wasn't rape. It wasn't an assault, but it was very violating and not okay. But like Facebook, a lot of mostly men are coming to his defense. Like, well, if it was that bad, you would have said something. Well, if it was that bad, you wouldn't have worked with him. Why'd you keep working? And yeah, believe me, I had a lot of shame that I kept going back to it because I didn't think I had an option. I didn't think several levels. I didn't think I was funny enough to get stage time anywhere else. I felt very alone. I felt like I must have like brought it on somehow. And it wasn't a one-time incident. I'm just telling you one of the ones that like I don't believe I've told very many people about because I have a lot of shame about not getting out of that booth. Just freezing and sitting there. If it happened now, I'd probably tase him. I don't have a taser, but if I did, I'd tase him. I'm a different human, but like so there was a lot of stuff. I remember he'd try to get girls to drive him to San Diego for stage time. And I would go to San Diego, but I would ride in my own separate car. And I didn't know at the time that it was just my instincts being like, no way in hell. And he was a drinker. He was a big drinker. And banned from most of the clubs for being predatory, and for he would carry around this big gulp with a bunch of like shooters in his pocket that he would just like pour into this big gulp like he was a 20-year-old at a club, so weird. But he was an alcoholic. I mean, I have my old Al-Anon roots where you can't call someone an alcoholic, but now I'm in another 12 step. It's like, you can call people alcoholics. But like, yeah, he was a drunk. And so my instincts were always like, and they were spot on, but I didn't know how, but it was just like, don't ride with him to San Diego. And so I didn't, and he would get very mad. And then he eventually stopped asking me to go to San Diego. And it was later told to me by a friend that the reason why he wanted me to go is because he wanted me alone in a car. And Facebook was full of women coming forward with their stories, strong women, which made me feel, and I think that's why I want to tell this story, because it made me feel a couple strong women came forward and said, I don't get rattled very easily, but that man terrified me to my core. And it's just like the strongest of us can still feel really scared, and I know I'm super strong, but I froze in those moments, and then I went back, and then I went back. And then I quit comedy for a long time. And I didn't even really know that's why I quit comedy for a few years. I finally went back to comedy, thank God. And it sucks. There's a lot of regret there because I started with a lot of women that are doing very, very well now. And I started over. And I don't have regrets. I know that things play out exactly the way they're supposed to. Like, I think if I didn't go back, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And I love doing Crawl Space. And I think Crawl Space is one of my favorite, most important things I've ever worked on. So I know things happen for a reason. And I know that it wasn't my shame. It was his. But it's hard because it was, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, a lot of women shared that he was a predator. He was a predator that was banned from every club for being a predator. But it was just like, oh, well, and a lot of like when I came back to comedy, I forgot, I lost my train of thought, but when I came back to comedy and I wasn't sure, I didn't realize that was why I'd quit. I went to a show one night and Big Mike was there, and his like friend, who I also have like unfriended, and he's just a trash fire too, just a creepy dude. I went to this show and I'm on it, and he plays everybody up to like Eminem. He plays me to I Want to Sex You Up, and is just like licking his lips. And this is not Big Mike, this is this other guy. Licking his lips, and it's just so gross. And then he messages me while I'm watching the show, and he's like, oh, and my intro is, I'm so sexy, this girl's so hot. And he's messaging me while I'm sitting in there, and he's like, you're so hot. And I'm just like, Jesus. And Big Mike was there. Shocking, those two were friends. And Big Mike was there, and that was one of the first times I'd seen him since. And he knew what he had done. Like right now, thinking about him is making my skin crawl. Like I had like literal PTSD. The guy came up to me to go hug me. I hit the floor. Like I ducked way down, and I was like, I don't want to hug you. Don't touch me. And he went, oh yeah. And then he was like, I know that I was inappropriate, but come on, Kim, you're like, and the whole gaslighting thing. I was like, no, we're good. I don't want to hug. Hope you're well. Bye. But like, I like right now, my body is tensing up thinking about that guy. And that guy did, like, I thank God came back to comedy, and I thank God had friends around me that I could talk to about this situation, and I felt validated. God knows what he had done to other women that didn't get that same validation. Like and this made me like think about all the times in my life that I have had to choose between standing up for myself and my body autonomy, to jobs, to friends. And I don't know. I hope that I have a lot of insecurity about this episode. I did last week too, and it was received well, but which is awesome. But I have a lot of insecurity about it because it's very vulnerable and it's very scary. I don't wish somebody dead. Rush Limbaugh, he died today. It's pretty awesome. He was a really bad dude, guys. This time last year, he was explaining to people that Mayor Pete shouldn't be able to be president because what would that say if two men were kissing on the stage? Bad dude. If he I don't know, but I'm saying like with Big Mike, like I don't wish someone dead. I also, for the record, wasn't wishing Rush Limbaugh was dead. I truthfully haven't thought about him in a very long time, but I don't wish somebody dead. Well, I went on a really weird tangent. I don't wish somebody dead, but it's such a hard feeling because I am grateful that I don't have to run into him anymore, because when I would run into him, it was really scary, and I would have a physical body reaction. And your body doesn't lie to you. Like, even if you want to run away from something, your body doesn't fucking lie to you, man. And I would have a physical reaction to seeing Big Mike. And so I'm sad for his family. I know he left behind a couple of daughters. I'm sad for them. And that's all I'll say, you know. It was, but it is interesting because it is talked about the Me Too movement and how like some stuff is just not that bad. And like, we're making a big deal out of like, I want to just go on a little adventure with me on just, here's some sexual harassment I have received in my life. I know that's like, come along to this really fun adventure I'm about to. In college, I lived with a fraternity. I lived in a house where the fraternity brothers lived, and then there was a fraternity house. So I didn't live with all the frat boys. I lived with two, and then we'd have the frat parties. So let me clear it. Like I say lived with the fraternity. I technically did. They were over there all the time. I might as well have. But there were two guys named Rob and Justin. And they relentlessly talked sexual shit to me. And it was very uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable. Justin used to come out of his bedroom and he'd have his bike upside down. And so he would spin the wheel and then he'd put his dick on the wheel and then sit there and like moan about how good it felt while I sat there. And I was just like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, it just feels so good. But they would tell me constantly that I would not make it in Hollywood because I wasn't pretty. I was very ugly. You will not make it in Hollywood. So either get really good at blowjobs or don't go. so do you want to practice on us? Like, it was just very demeaning. And it was like, there was not a word for that back then. It was just like boy talk. Boys just talk to you that way. And like, so when you're like, well, I just know there's like my father was one of them. Like, you're being so sensitive. And it's just like, it's so demeaning, and being called ugly and like being like, you have nothing to offer anybody because you're not pretty, and also not true. I know. But like, you have nothing to offer anybody because you're not pretty. So therefore you better learn how to blow dudes. And if you don't know how to do that, then you really have nothing to offer the world. And they did this relentlessly. They did it all the time. And then I had this friend who, we're friendly now on all this stuff, but she was one of my dear friends. One time they did it in front of her, and I looked at her and I was like, hoping for like, an ally, somebody to like, oh, thank God this is happening in front of somebody. And she went just to impress, like, and that's the other thing, we as other people who are witnessing this shit should say something. She didn't want that. And I get it. It was like, it was scarier to have those boys do it to her too, or hate her too, or be, to be subjected to whatever the fuck those two idiots were going to say. By the way, both of them have really lost their hair and have age has not been kind to them. I have a lot of men in my life who don't have their hair, and you all look beautiful the way you are. I wasn't trying to put down bald men. I was just saying, age has not been kind to them. They're wrinkly now. I don't know. I feel so, I never talk about people's appearance, and I'm trying to, and so it always makes me feel weird because I don't, telling someone that they're not worth something because they're unattractive or they don't have hair is just like one of the most mind-blowing, idiotic, low-hanging fruit. I don't know. So, but I'm saying the years have not been kind to them. And I think that they're still in that small ass idiotic town. So I think I'm fine. But I looked at my friend to get her to, I don't know, stand up for me or help me in that moment. And she said, it's true. I mean, and you also don't have very big boobs either. So you either need to get breast implants, get good at blowjobs, or get prettier. One of my best friends said that to me. And those guys like, oh, high-fived. And everybody in the room was like, that's so fucking funny. She is flat-chested and ugly. Start blowing dudes now. And it hurts so bad. And like that like, this story isn't, it's a lighter story than the first one I just told, just because my goal in this episode is just to talk about the many levels and and I promise you, every woman and any woman who's listening to this now is probably like, yeah, me too. That's where the me too comes from. Is that right? And so like, there's so many levels to it, and there's so many, I'm trying to think, like, I want to make the title of this episode Me Too, but I'm scared. I'm scared that it's going to scare people away, and I want people to listen, but I also don't want to be scared away because of same reason why that girl like doubled down and said I had small boobs. You know what I mean? It's just like, you're terrified of what people are going to say about you if you stand up for this shit. And luckily, the one of the guys I lived with was the president of the fraternity, and it had gotten back to him. I never went to him. It gotten back to him what these two men were doing to me. And it was essentially like sexual bullying, I guess, had gotten back to him. And he came to me and he was like, is this shit happening? And I was like, yeah, it's fine though. I'll be fine. And he's like, it's not fine. And I don't like being the president of a fraternity that has men in the fraternity. Like, God bless that guy. You know what I mean? I don't want to be part of a fraternity that has men like that in it. I don't want that. So I'm going to fix this now. And he went to those two guys and he said, you need to, I know what's going on. It's not something that we stand for in the DTDs at all. So we are, you're either going to apologize to Kim, you're going to go to her and apologize and then cool the behavior, or I'm going to take steps to remove you from the fraternity. And those two motherfuckers decided to take steps because they were so hell-bent that what they were doing was not wrong, that they refused to apologize when they knew they weren't in the wrong. And they got kicked out of the fraternity. Like, what? And it, you know, I vaguely remember feeling guilt or shame or just like, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't want anybody. But the thing is also shockingly, those two boys weren't that popular in the fraternity. So no one really bat an eye about it. I did run into Rob later in Vegas, and he was just as weird as he was back then. So it was just like, he was just a weird, creepy dude who just didn't know how to talk to women. But I share that story because now I can laugh at it, 20 years later. But when it was happening, I felt so small and so scared and like I deserved it somehow. And that like they were probably right. I wouldn't make it in Hollywood. I am not that pretty. Like that's like, I don't believe that now. Believe me, I have probably too high of a self-esteem. Um, which is awesome because I went from that girl who believed them, who was like, I probably do need, I mean, I want to get breast implants, but that's not because what Justin McQueffy said to me. Right. But like, oops, I said his last name. Don't care. But like, but like at the time, I thought that all of my worth was based on what I look like and what those guys were saying, and the many guys around that were like just locker room talk, or you're just being sensitive. So I share that story. I have like 3 more. I'm really sorry. I promise we're gonna have a wonderful palate cleanse, and I'm not sorry. I think it's important to talk about this stuff because I promise you, there's nothing I'm sure of than every woman in your life has dealt with some sort of level of this, probably worse. And so I think it shouldn't be an uncomfortable topic. I think we heal when we talk about this stuff. And the more you talk about this stuff, like I've brought up these things in front of men, and I've had one of them pull me aside and say, I didn't know that wasn't cool to do. Not the blowjob shit, but like something smaller. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, I never even thought about it from your perspective. I'm so sorry. I'm going to do things differently now. So just like, how are we supposed to learn if we don't talk about this shit? The next story, yeah, we'll just go a couple weeks right, a couple days before the world ended. I performed at a place for the very first time. I've been wanting to perform at this venue for a long time. It's pretty popular in Hollywood. It's no more. COVID took it out, but I really wanted to perform at it. And a couple of days before the world ended, before LA shut down anyway, I had a set there, and it was ran by a guy who has been pretty vocal since the pandemic that, you know, he's kind of an anti-masker and all that stuff. So there's not really a surprise here on that he said this to me, but it was just such a small, and again, I share these little stories because I was talking to a girlfriend earlier, and she was just like, I sometimes feel like we shouldn't, you know, dwell on these little stories. And it's like, yeah, but we shouldn't have to deal with this sort of behavior because it's not rape. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, you don't get a medal because you didn't rape me in the moment. You just said some really fucked up shit about me being a woman. You know what I mean? So like, I share this because, it is something that I feel very passionate about, and I do get very heated. I was raised by a man who sexually abused me, and I have people in my life that have justified what he did to me, or don't believe me, or minimize it. And I'm working right now in my program, in my 12-step program, and in my personal work, with a lot of memories that are coming up to what happened to me as a kid. And they're not getting better, dude. They're not. You don't suppress a bunch of memories because they were good. And a lot of them are coming up, and I can't imagine being a person and I can't imagine taking the side of a man who used to shower with his little girl and touch her. I can't imagine being on that side of history. Do you know what, like, history, you know what I mean? But on that side of things, and just hearing someone say it, like, and I know that I take a deep breath. That's a lot of information to throw at you. I mean, if you've gotten this far, you already know my past, but I've experienced from the very worst to the very littlest, but like, it's all important. It's all it's all important. Yes. One damaged me a whole lot more than the next story I'll tell you. The next story was just like, fuck. It like, hearing this stuff, it's just like, and talking about this stuff and hearing other people's stories or experiences, it's like, we are so far away. Like, we're so close to change, but we're so fucking far away at the same time. And you can say that about anything that's going on right now. I think like the systemic racism, one of them, we're so close, but we're so fucking far away from change. And so I was performing at this this venue that I really wanted to perform at, and the guy who runs it, I had a bad set. Everybody did, by the way. COVID was very scary, unknown, and was about to shut down Los Angeles. So there was like 5 people in the audience, and the audience members were just like not interested. I don't know if they knew they came to a comedy show. Everybody bombed. Everybody bombed, right? Real bad. And if you don't know what bomb means, that means you just like really fail at being a comic. And so I went up to the producer of the show, the guy who runs the thing, the showroom, and I went up and I thanked him for the set. And I was like, "Oh, rough set. I hope I get to come back." And he went, "Yeah." And I was around other male comedians and males, and he was like, "Yeah, you're going to be able to come back." I was sitting in the back just masturbating through your whole set. Of course, I want you to come back for that. And they all high-fived. And this was March 2020. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, but that was 2019. We don't act that way anymore, right? Like, no, that was 2020. That was March 2020. And I've told that story to a few people and they're like, Cam, that's just guys being funny. He was just joking. Don't be sensitive. You're a comedian, right? And it's just like, I didn't know that guy. I met that guy once prior to him booking me. We weren't pals. We didn't have like a rapport. Like I have one of the best sense of humors of anybody in the world. I'm literally one of the funniest people in the world. A guy I used to work with says that all the time. People are like, you're cocky. And it's like, yeah, I am. But if you think about how many people are in the world, and then you think about how many of us can stand on a stage and make hundreds and hundreds of people laugh, you're literally one of the funniest people in the world, right? But so like, I have a great sense of humor, and gaslighting me into saying that something like that made me uncomfortable. I'm like having a hard time with is just don't, obviously, right? Don't. The next story is, oh man, God, it's the history is just like, if you are mad at the Me Too movement, I implore you to crack a book. Like if you don't understand, or you're kind of taking it personally, or you're really mad at me right now for bringing up these tiny stories in your brain, I would maybe put down your ego, put down your whatever, and stop making it about you and listen. Shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? Like I was talking to a girlfriend the other day about she was like, I don't understand. Not I don't understand, but we were talking about how white people have kind of tried to take over the BLM movement and the black, yeah, and I was like, I don't think it's not like, it's not, because she was like, I feel like I can't have an opinion, and I'm like, it's not that. It's just like, have your opinion, but like, shut the fuck up. You don't know anything. I know nothing about what it's like to be a black person in America. I know nothing about that. I know what I've seen. I know how it makes me feel. I know it makes me sad and fucked up and angry. But if I'm in a room with a dude who has been through it, who's a black guy and wants to talk about his story, I don't get mad about that. It's like, yeah, that guy, shut the fuck up and listen. So I'm just saying, like, same with the Me Too movement. If you're upset about it and you're like, and you're pissed off right now at me, I guess, I don't know, but like, maybe pause. You've trusted me this far to like listen to what, like 45 episodes. That's exciting. Like maybe, I don't know. And I have a feeling that most of the people who listen to this are not that way at all. So far, everything I've seen and heard from my listeners, you guys are pretty fucking rad. I appreciate you. I'm one lucky broad for you. The last story, I left a job a couple of years ago. And I haven't really talked, I talked about it publicly on a podcast that actually has a lot of viewers a couple of years ago, and I was really ashamed, really scared. It's one of the last bars I worked at, and the bouncer, so much levels to this. I lost 2 friends over this. One girl I was friends with for like 15 years. We were like best friends, like literally best friends. She got me the job. The other girl I was close to because of the one girl, and we'll call them J and K. How's that? We'll just call them J and K because I don't want to say their names. I don't know. I don't harbor any beef, but I do know who they are and where they stand as people. And, if they came back and made some kind of amends, I would probably accept it. But it's like one of those, like, I don't know if we'll ever be cool again, though. It was just so damaging and terrible. But Kay, I was really good. I was, she's one of my best friends. And Jay was also one of my dear friends. And so the bouncer, the bouncer and I got the treatment from this story. I got all of the cliches. Well, you were drunk. Well, we all played grab ass. Well, you're being really sensitive. Well, you were wearing a short dress. Like all the cliches, and from two women that at the time I had a lot of respect for. The bouncer's name was Boris, and I was not friendly with this guy. I did not like him. He actually treated a lot of the girls that worked there like I don't even want to get into what was wrong with him, but I was not friendly with him. There was no grab ass between Boris and I. I barely spoke to him unless I had to. Like, he was not a good dude. He was rude. He was mean. I did not have a relationship with him. I don't know why I feel like I need to make a case for myself, but I had to then, and I guess I still feel like I have to now. Oh gosh, the kitten's going. So I came in one night and I was wearing a dress and I was stone cold sober and I didn't drink the rest of the evening. The reason why I remember that, because we did a lot of drinking at that bar is just basically a shit show, free for all, right? But I wasn't drinking that night. I was driving around my dear friend Anna Land, who has passed away, who was very drunk. And in fact, I think we actually, she got 86 from that bar that night. So rest in peace, Anna. We miss you. But yeah, she caused a big scene and we had to, but so there was no booze involved. And, and I come in and I have my short dress on. Wasn't that short? Doesn't matter if it was. Regular picks me up and hugs me. And as he does, he accidentally lifts my skirt a little bit over my bottom. Right. And I was like, oh no. And I like pushed it down and I walked in and Boris said something creepy. And I was like, fuck off, Boris. Once again, I was never nice to this guy ever. Like there's no way this guy thought we had any kind of rapport. I didn't even say hello to him. He was so rude that right away I was like, not a safe person, just, whatever, right? You'd say hi to him and he'd literally ignore you. So I walk into into the closet where we'd clock in. And the closet, if you're watching on YouTube, it's the same size of what I'm in right now. So very small. And I clock in and Boris is like 6'5". I clock in, I turn around. Boris is standing above me with his, leaned down with his face in my face. And he goes, do you have any panties under that dress? And I went, what? What the fuck? And he said, I asked if he had any panties under that, like cornering me. And I pushed him as hard as I could to get him out of it. And I was like, get the fuck away from me, Boris. Get the fuck away from me. He's like, I don't know why you're so upset. I'm like, get the fuck away from me. And then the night continued, whatever. The next day I go in and I grapple with this too, because the manager is still a dear friend. And I do harbor a little bit of a resentment on how this whole thing was handled. And it's honestly it's something I just have to let go. And I know he's remorseful years later, but I don't know if we've ever really talked about it, but we're still friends. I go to the manager and I was like, hey, I need to say something that happened yesterday and I'm uncomfortable. And this was prior to Me Too, by the way. This is prior to around the time it was breaking. I'm not sure exactly, but it was like still an uncomfortable thing to be like, hey, no, maybe not. I can't remember if this was 2017, 2016, somewhere around there. I don't know. If you want to do the math when Me Too happened, I can't. I whatever. But I was like, this thing happened with Boris last night and I'm really uncomfortable. And he was like, oh man, that sucks. I don't know what to do. And I was just like, okay, well, I would like it to not happen again. So, and then the next 2 weeks, I assumed that the manager had gone and talked to him because Boris retaliated. The next 2 weeks, Boris would not kick anybody out for me. One night I had trouble with this guy. It was right before Boris was about to get off work. And this guy picked a fight with me, got cut off, something like that. It was like a big drama thing. And then Boris refused. He was like, I'm not kicking anybody out for you. So the guy just stood at the bar and called me a whore. Literally, you're a whore. Look at the whore. This fucking whore. She's a whore for 10 minutes, right? Boris bouncer refused, and this guy wouldn't leave. And this was the type of bar where it was just the bartender and the bouncer. There's no manager. There's no anything. I got a bar back later that night, but like the bar back hadn't shown up. So it was literally this big dude, this other dude who was calling me a whore, was like 6'3", big, 200 pounds, calling me a whore. And the only thing I have between me is the bar. And my bouncer refuses to kick him out. And he's like, I'm not doing it. Goes outside. This new bouncer comes in. I'm like, can you please kick that guy out? And the new bouncer goes, yeah, I will, but I can't while I'm off the clock, and I can't clock in for a minute. Like I can't, he wasn't allowed to clock in until right on time. So he's like, I'm sorry, I got to wait until exactly 8. So this guy called me a whore until 8. And then at 8 o'clock, he left. And it was awful going to work, right? Those 2 weeks were awful. And then I talked to a girlfriend whose mother was a lawyer, and she was like, you could sue that bar. They didn't handle anything correctly at all. Like you could I guess the Me Too movement had just broke. So it was like, especially with the climate that it is now, and we're in California. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like I like everybody I work with. It's just that one guy. And like my two, J and K, are two of my best friends. I don't want to do that. I don't think that is, necessary or productive. I just don't want to work with this guy anymore. And she goes, what about this? Why don't you go to the manager and say, I need to talk to you. I'm really upset. I am also talking to you from a legal standpoint of, I'm not going to do anything, but this guy is going to do something, and then you're going to get sued. And also, I could for this. I don't know if I handled it as well as I would have now. I don't know. I don't know if there's really a handbook on, so I'm not going to put down past Kim for how she handled it. But I mentioned the S word. And then all of a sudden, now this is 3 weeks later, right? 3 weeks later, it's a big deal. And I'm asked, I need to write an email to the owner and the manager with exactly the date, the time, what I was wearing, what happened, where everything was. I need to account it. I had I came in one day, the co-owner, the boss or whatever, she wasn't the owner, but she would handled all that shit. And the manager were sitting there, and they're like, we need to talk. I got interrogated about it again, asked what I was wearing, what happened exactly. Was I drinking? Was I not drinking? Well, I heard you were drinking. Well, I was interrogated 3 times about this. And then they go, okay, I'm sobbing. I when I tell you, this was one of the hardest, especially I hadn't done any of the work I've done now. Now I'd be like, fuck off. And then what was hard too is that one of the bouncers I was very close to knew a lot about my dad's stuff. And when he went, I heard that Boris had done that to one of you. And I was praying it wasn't you because of everything you've been through. And I was like, what do you mean? And it wasn't because he was like, you've been through enough. It was, she's really sensitive when it comes to things like that. So she'll blow it way out of proportion because she's super triggered. And that was like, what? No, what he did was not okay. And so then the owner or the sub owner, I don't even know what the fuck she was, and the manager were like, what do you want done? And I'm sobbing, right? They're like, well, what do you want us to do? We haven't talked to Boris. And I was like, what? It's been 3 weeks. I've had to write emails. I've had to write accounts. I've been interrogated by you guys. I've had to talk to 4 different people, and you haven't spoken to him once. I got interrogated over this. I was the one who was hammered for details. Meanwhile, this motherfucker's wandering away, thinking he's fine. He's just an asshole who just coincidentally wouldn't kick anybody out. Probably because I told him to fuck off with the whole panning thing. I'm still mad, if you can tell. I'm not actually still mad. I don't need messages oh, be okay. I'm fine. That place is way in my rearview mirror. But, and I was like, well, I after I got over the fact that they hadn't at all talked to him, I went, okay, well, I don't want to work with him anymore. And they were like, well, what do you want us to do? There's not a lot of bouncers and there's not a lot of bartenders. We can't move the schedule around so you're comfortable. And I was like, well, you asked what I wanted. So that's what I wanted. I don't know what else to say. So then I guess the next day he came in and they finally talked to him. And it's so funny, instead of making it right or apologizing or saying he'd stop his behavior, he basically told him to fuck off, and then they fired him. And then so Jay, oh my God, my leg is numb. I made the mistake of coming in here and and talking on the phone for like 2 hours before I recorded. And so my butt I've been in here like 4 hours. Not smart, Krosky. Not smart at all. So so they fired him. So then I come on to work the next day, and Jay, one of the girls, who by the way is like a 45-year-old woman, not like a young girl. This next behavior, you'll ask, how old is this broad? She's ignoring me there, and I'm the bartender. Like I'm the only bartender. So I'm like, what do you want to drink? And she like orders, but won't look me in the eye. And I'm like, are you mad at me? And she's like, I'm not mad at you. I was like, okay, well, you seem mad. And she's like, I'm not mad. Okay. I'm not mad. I'm just tired. And I don't know about you, but I'm an adult woman. So when another adult tells me they're not mad at me, I'm just going to assume they're not mad at me because that's what they said. And that whatever they're going through has nothing to do with me. Guys, my butt is numb. It's numb. I wonder if there's a way. I wonder if, okay, I'm messing up the flow, but now if you see on the video, if you want to see me get real sweaty around minute 55, that's what happens when your butt goes numb, I guess. What am I saying? Oh yeah. So I just was like, okay, she's not mad at me. So I go home that night or I wake up the next morning and she had messaged me in the middle of the night, this 45-year-old woman on Instagram or on Facebook, and said, #boy bye. And I was like, what? So I clicked on her profile and she had blocked me on Facebook. Then I go to Instagram and she had blocked me on Instagram. So I text her. I'm like, hey girl, once again, this girl and I had been friends for like 10, 15 years. I text her. I'm like, hey girl, you sure you're not mad at me? Because you sent me a weird message in the middle of the night and you seem to have blocked me on all the social media. And she's like, yeah, I am pissed at you. You got Boris fired. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't get him fired. He got himself fired. But would you like to sit down and talk this through? And she's like, yeah, I could do that. So we pick a place to go coffee. I'm kind of nervous. I show up and I sit down and as I do when I'm nervous, I just find it's better to just go, I'm nervous. And then people go, I don't know, it just relieves my nerves. I had one comic once tell me I shouldn't tell anybody I was nervous, but I think it's fine. I don't know. I told her I was like, I'm kind of nervous. And she goes, why are you nervous? We're both adults here. And it took all I had not to straight laugh in her face. I'm like, you mean the person who just said that, who wrote #boy bye and then blocked me? I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to get coffee. So I sit down and she goes through every cliche. You were really drunk. You were wearing that really short skirt. I mean, you did kind of ask for it. I mean, we do all play grab ass. Like you're being really sensitive, like literally all. And this is a progressive woman. Like up until this point, I would have, if you would have told me this is how she would have responded to something like this, I would have not believed you. And I was like, whatever it was, I was just like, this is what happened. And she was like, okay, well, whatever. I don't know what to say. I guess I'm glad we had this talk. We're cool now. And, I see your point and your side, but it wasn't like resolved. There was no like, I'm sorry that happened. No, sorry, I was blaming you because you were drunk, which I wasn't. Even if I was, still don't deserve to be cornered in the closet and have a grown man try to lift up my dress to see what kind of underwear I have on. And so I go into work the next day and I just got into my first comedy festival, right? And I was really excited. And I worked Monday nights, and Kay, who was one of my best friends, like Jay was a friend, but Kay was like one of my best friends in the world, right? She worked at 8:00 on Mondays and relieved me. And so I was like, hey, I got into this comedy festival in 2 weeks. Can you come in at 7 instead of 8? And we did this shit all the time for each other, right? Like she's like, hey, I'm going to be late. Do you mind if I come in at 10 and you just work till 10? Like we did that shit for each other all the time. And I was like, I got in this cool comedy festival. I'm so excited. And she goes, I'm going to be really tired. So no, I'm not going to do that. And then I realized they were never, all of them everybody I worked with felt like I did this to Boris, got him fired. Now he doesn't have a job. And like, I was like, I can't work in this environment. Like I was, the anxiety I felt when I went into work every day was just like, I can't even describe, like shaking nerves, like just like I was a wreck. I was a fucking wreck. And I'm different now. I know that there was a lot of shame around that kind of like reaction. And so I put in my 2 weeks, and Kay Kay and I are not friends anymore. And Jay came into the Bronco bar years later, like a couple years later, and she's a Bronco fan. She knows where the Bronco bar is. And I wasn't very kind to her, and I think she was trying to do an apology. She was like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. I'm great. And she's like, everything good since you've left? It was very much like, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing a lot of comedy. I bartend here and there. I'm doing great. And she was like, yeah, well, then what happened was probably for the best, right? It was like, you mean that guy sexually misconducting me? I don't know what the right verbiage for that is, and then the whole bar, which is mostly women, taking his side and calling me, I deserve it, I'm a slut, I drank too much, like all that was for the best. Cool. It was, because it got you out of my life, because I don't want a woman like that in my life. But it sounds like I harbor resentment. I don't. If I saw either one of those women now, I would ask how they were. But I would never bring them back into my world because of how that whole thing was handled and how they responded. The girl Kay, who was one of my best friends, I wish her. I hear she's doing very, very well. Her life is night and day, and I hear she has become a very different person than she was, as I have too. I wish her well. There's no resentments, but it was hard. I had to leave a job over that, and yeah. And then I tried to go back and visit a couple times, and it's very much like the girl who is too sensitive about a guy grabbing ass, and it's just I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, except for listen. When Big Mike died, a friend of mine kind of didn't really stand up for him, but kind of stood up for him on someone's post calling him a predator, and stood up for him. And he was buried by the many, many women that Big Mike violated. And then he called me to complain about how that wasn't his intention. And I was trying to explain to him how I felt, and he kept interrupting. And I was like, hey, dude, that's the problem. You felt like you needed to chime in when somebody was telling when a person was telling their truth about what he had done to them. You felt you needed to have an opinion too. You don't. Just listen to people. Listen to people's experiences. I thank you for listening to this. It was hard to get through, and I'm very nervous to release it. I'm very nervous. Oh, yeah, it feels really vulnerable. It feels scary. It feels like some people will be like, none of those stories feel that bad. Or like, maybe you were that sensitive because of what happened to you as a kid. Like, but those are all my voices, those are voices of ghosts from my past who have said that. But like, none of that all of that is simply not true. All of the stories I have shared are mine, and my feelings around them are valid. And what was done in those scenarios was wrong. Varying degrees of wrong, sure, but I don't know. If you are struggling with any of this kind of thing, my email is always open. I would love if you just, KYMKRAL space at gmail.com. Yeah, just know that you're not alone. There's a reason why it's me too. It's funny that the story I told in the beginning of Big Mike, that I literally said me too, and it wasn't about the movement. It was just literally me going, yeah, me too. So just, I don't know, listen to each other, be kind. Oh God, my cat is starting to pound on his food dishes. Thanks for letting me get that out. Let's palate cleanse, shall we? Shall we palate cleanse? I have two fun things that have happened. One, our lovely poop scooper from last week responded with all of my questions. If you don't remember, she basically was dating a guy from college who was in college when she was in high school, and she went up there for the weekend, and he got really drunk the first night, and then like shit all over shit in the middle of the room, and then kicked her out the next day because he was so embarrassed. And I was like, what kind of poop was it? Like, some of my questions were like, what kind of poop was it? Oh, this is your poop scoop, by the way. We're doing a palate cleanse. Hopefully you're still here. This is a hard episode for me. Maybe it was a hard episode for you to listen to too. Let's all just take a cleansing breath, baby. Especially since we can right now. So I was like, what was the consistency of the poop? Like why, like what was it, Saturday? Was it Sunday? Oh my God, my butt is numb. Okay. So she was like, she did say that she loved hearing the story. It's been a long time. So so she had to think about this. Or wait, I won't read. That was the personal thing to me. Okay. So she said to answer your questions. And once again, I haven't read this yet. I like reading it live to get my real response. I don't know if that's for you or for me. I really, I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Okay. It was Saturday night, but it was a holiday weekend. So I was supposed to stay until Monday. I woke up, saw him squatting in the middle of the room. I was in his bed, which was lofted. I am also completely blind without my glasses, so I couldn't see all the details to answer your wiping questions. Oh yeah, I forgot. I was wondering where he, like, if he wiped, did he like grab a sock? Like, I feel like that's when you would know you were shitting in your room, right? Like there's no toilet paper. You're like, oh fuck. Well, this isn't the bathroom. You're not the salt lick. That is a hillbilly family joke. Hey, you're not the salt lick. We're pretending we're cows. Okay. That's a whole other thing. So as a high schooler, that wasn't the most that wasn't the most experience with guys. I really had no idea what to do, so I just rolled back over to let him finish in peace. What a gem! That's so funny. Finish in peace. I was freaking out about what to do, but then he laid down on his futon, and a little bit later woke up to him cleaning it up. I let him finish clean up before I got out of bed. And that's when he said, I think you should leave. Super embarrassed. Totally not how I would have handled the same situation if it happened to me now. But at the time, I just left. The worst part was when I got home, my parents kept asking why I was home early. My dad had already not wanted me to go, but he went to a college he went to a college I was looking at. So he let me. I finally gave in and told him. And years later, my dad met him at a business meeting. And when he said his name, the guy turned completely pale. My dad, of course, had fun with this situation, kept saying things to imply he knew. And the poor guy was super nervous the rest of the meeting. It doesn't get like that story just comes full circle. You know what I mean? Like that story just comes full circle. Oh, that's so good. I'm so happy right now. I have another poop scoop I want to read, but that was just, do I save the other one? Let's see how, this is the next one that I have is really, really long. What time is it? Yeah, I'm going to be real with you guys. My butt is numb. This episode took a lot out of my like stuff, right? So I'm probably going to, we'll read the next poop scoop next week, but that is amazing. I wonder what he said to, like, I could ask questions about this all day. All day I could ask questions. Like, I kind of want to get this guy's number and just be like, has it haunted you? Did you have other girls spend the night afterwards? Like, were you afraid? Like once I peed this dude's bed I've told you guys about, and like I read somewhere that there's something called chronic adult bedwetters that like that takes place sometimes as women in your like mid 30s. And when I was in my mid 30s, I peed that dude's bed. So I was like terrified I just peed the bed now. Like I like pictured everybody I ever was going to be with for the rest of my life. I'd have to explain that sometimes I just wet the bed. And so I wonder if this guy forever was just like, do I just poop? Like I wonder if he quit drinking. Like I wonder how this altered his life. Years later, he still was like, oh, you're the girl's dad. Oh man, I live for that stuff. If you have a poop scoop story, or you just want to say hi, or you want to, share your Me Too story, this is a safe space. I won't read your Me Too story unless you ask me to, unless you're like, I feel like this needs to be heard. I will definitely do that, but I won't read. But if you just want to vent your Me Too story and you want to keep it confidential, my email is open for that too. Just know you're not alone. I have experienced from the very, very little harassment to, I already shared with you some of my dad's stuff. So it's hairy and you're not alone. So email me your poop stories, your Me Too stories, or any story, or just tell me what you're grateful for, But KYMKRALSPACE@gmail.com. I will tell you, I'm just going to DM those people back and say, oh, great. Will you please email this to, I just want to keep all the poop scoop stories in one place. That way I just don't miss any. You know what I mean? Like, it's not me being like hyper vigilant or like anal retentive. Is that the right word? Retentive? Whatever. It's not me being any of that. It's just me being like, oh, I'd like to keep it all in the same spot. Otherwise I'll miss it. So that's the episode, guys. I have it all prepped and ready. I would like to read you, as I ask you every week, if you get a second, please leave a comment, a review, a rating. It just does really well to just help me grow and grow my show. And I would love it. So, I am reading. Oh, I'm going to read a review from someone I got to meet at a show. The first show I was ever called a headliner, like an actual, like where they like promoted me as the headliner in 2019, I think, at a spot that COVID took, unfortunately, the Ruby Room or something like that. I should probably know that. I have it written down. Don't worry. Dan Kurtz. I met him there, and then I got to see him a couple more times, and then we're friends on Facebook and everything. And he's just a really swell fella. So he wrote, so thank you for the review, Dan, and always listening. He wrote, Kim says the quiet parts out loud, and it's always amazing. I love that. The quiet parts out loud. I think we all should try and do that, I mean, maybe that's just because it's my way and I'm a little biased, but I feel like the more we talk about all the shit we've been through and all the weird shit we do alone, maybe we all wouldn't be so isolated in this world. I think one of the biggest hardest parts about being human is that we like suffer these like things by ourselves because we think we're so terminally unique and we're not. You know what I mean? That's, I think, why I love Poop and Pants so much, is it just like brings us together. It's like everybody, no matter who you are, what your ethnicity, skin color, sexual orientation, old, young, you've pooped your pants. And if you haven't, your time is coming, my friend. I'm going to make a t-shirt that says that right after I get off of this, because I think that's my tagline. So if you could give it a rating, a review, a subscribe, share it with someone, I would love it. Please follow me on all the socials, KYMKRAL. I'm on stereo every Tuesday and Thursday too. We're just talking we're learning stuff now, not always conspiracy theories. That turned into a real bummer real quick. A lot of QAnon people wanted to come on and tell us how Ellen DeGeneres is really dead and Anderson Cooper eats babies. Those are things they really believe, guys, really believe. Yeah, I'm there every Tuesday and Thursday. If you want to check out dates or anything like that, I'm updating KimKral.com. Not that I have any live dates, but I have some Zoom stuff maybe soon. I don't know. But thank you so much for listening. And thank you for allowing me to have this space. I was really hard to record. I'm, like 7 hours late to recording this episode. So it feels good to get out. And I hope that I'm sad that I hope that some of you relate. And by I hope you relate, I just hope you know that if you do relate, you're not alone. And that's it. Just be safe, be kind, listen to each other, please. That's one of my big, I'm trying to be better at myself. But yeah, I will see you next week. I hope everyone has a good weekend. I love you all. Bye.